devices, and therefore we are not going to get into these semiconductors is a vast ocean. We are not going to get into everything, but the essential details of semiconductors, because let us say, for example, you talk about the diodes and transistors. The diode is basically a one junction device, whereas a transistor is a two junction device. So you have like a PN junction which forms a diode, whereas PNP or NPN, you have one junction, PN junction, then you have a NP junction. So it is like two junction device. So both the transistors and this thing, they operate on this PN junction principles. But what is this P-type material? What is this N-type material? And how is a junction formed? So what does that junction give us? Okay. So these things essentially lie in understanding the basics of the semiconductors, which is what we are going to learn today. Okay. So I want to put very brief, because you don't have this course. You might have learned something in your high school and also in the physics course. But let us recall some of those essential concepts, which is the primary objective of this class. Fine. So I have already explained this. What is the purpose of today's class? We will see this. So semiconductor devices such as diodes, transistors, as I told you, and integrated circuits can be found everywhere in our daily life. And without semiconductors, none of your applications like cell phones, for that matter, TV or any electronic applications like whatever you take, rectifiers, okay, you take amplifiers, any circuits, they use semiconductors. What is the thing that is there in the semiconductor that it is governing our life? That is what the class is about. If I am able to deliver that message, that is the success of this lecture. So personal computers clearly demonstrate this trend. For example, you can see the growth of the semiconductor materials. What was yesterday in the technology in industry with the computing facility is not there today. Every day there is an innovation, massive economic growth is there with the semiconductors. The industries are all based on silicon industry. Okay, so all those who are willing to go into any electronic applications or VLSI design type of courses, you have to understand the semiconductors. Semiconductors is a separate ocean. We are not going to talk about the entirety of the semiconductors, but the essential concepts definitely will try to underline. So in this class, the essential fact that which has driven the successful growth of computer industry is that through industrial skill and technological advances such as the lithography, for that matter, the materials itself, the lithography, for that matter, lithography decides the feature dimensions of these sizes. If you look at an integrated circuit today, you have millions of transistors. But you think about putting millions of transistors in a 1 centimeter square area, you think about the crosstalk and noise, and how are these millions of transistors going to interact among themselves, and what are all the problems or what is the technology requiring for us to be able to put millions of transistors in a 1 centimeter square. Okay, so these are all the things that is there in the semiconductor technology industry. Okay, so the technological advancements have been so vast that today we have come to this stage. If you look at the semiconductors, the diode itself, the diode came somewhere in 1947, and if I'm correct, and then the transistor came in something like 1957. And these things have been possible only because of the advancement in the science, namely the quantum physics. Quantum mechanics essentially talks about an electron. Okay, or I would rather say it is not only electron, it is in general, it talks about any particles which have a dimensions to that level, subatomic level, we have to get into, or even nanometric level. Anything, the regular feature is like micron. So micron sized dimensions, which is 10⁻⁶, you can talk with the classical mechanics. But if you want to go into the nanometric dimensions, you have to actually invoke quantum mechanics. So the advent of quantum mechanics with the starting of the beginning of the somewhere around 1900s. Okay, then when Max Planck put forward the photon concept, okay, quantization of energy, and then all these people, you talk about Einstein, the greatness of Einstein, photoelectric effect, and then talk about Fermi, Dirac, all these people, and then you talk about Feynman, okay, a lot of people, de Broglie, okay, and then Davis and Germer, all these who actually talked about the experimental evidence for the de Broglie hypothesis. De Broglie talked about the existence of the duality of the matter as waves and particle. Okay, until then it was behaved that most of them they treated light as waves. So understanding of light was the essential inspiration for the beginning of quantum mechanics. Okay, so but even after quantum mechanics was founded, only in 1947 we had the p-n junction diode. With that, until then it was like wall diode, very huge electronic stuff. Okay, humongous. Now, even if you look at a computer which was there in 1970, it is the hard drive is very huge. Or you talk about so semiconductor industry for that matter has given us a lot in our life without a doubt. Is that clear? Do you agree with this?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what is there in so special about the semiconductor? What is a semiconductor? That is what we are going to talk about. The physics. Okay, little bit of the physics. Okay, so define a semiconductor. If you define a semiconductor, number of electrons in the outer shell. Okay, so if I want to define, for example, if I take silicon, silicon belongs to group 4 element, and we know silicon is the some kind of a spine for us. Silicon is the backbone for the semiconductor industry. Okay, almost all of these devices what we use today are all silicon based. There is a reason for it. Why silicon? Of course, there are other semiconductors. There are other semiconductors like compound semiconductors too. Okay, but silicon, if you look at the silicon group 4, which means outer shell is 4 electrons. That is precisely the matter. This is the crux of the matter in semiconductor. We'll come to that. Know the crystal structure of silicon and the cause and the result of defects. What defects gives us? Okay, understand intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductor behavior, and then explain in detail what depletion regions are, how they are formed. If I take two types of extrinsic semiconductor material, P and N, okay, and forming a PN junction. What is this PN junction? Under forward bias, what is a PN junction and reverse bias? Okay, semiconductors are materials whose electrical properties lie in between conductors and insulators. So if you look at conductors, example of a conductor, is metal. The metal, why metal is a conductor? It comes from the fact that metals have lot of free electrons. And semiconductors, on the other hand, they are bound electrons. Okay, insulators deeply bound to the atom. Okay, semiconductors, by giving some impetus, we can be able to excite those bound electrons and come to the conduction band. So that is the essentiality between the conductors, semiconductors and insulators, which gives rise to the difference in the conductivity, like what is shown on this slide. Insulators, the conductivity is 10 power minus 18 mho means ohm inverse, meter inverse. Okay, that is what it is. Okay, mho per meter. But so Siemens per meter is the common unit. So if you look at 10 power minus 18, extremely very poor conductivity insulator like wood. That is why one has to stand on the wood when you are working on an electrical equipment so that you don't get shocked. This is a fact that we have been learning from, today it is even in primary car it is there. Okay, and semiconductors, they have a wide range of conductivity. That is the fundamental thing. Why, how we are able to tailor this conductivity for a semiconductor 10 power minus 8 to minus 3. Whereas conductors have a lot of free electrons. When I say free electrons, that is free to wander around the solid. That free electron does not belong to one particular atom. The free electron can move around the crystal even with very small, extremely small excitation. Okay. Conductors, one which is able to freely conduct electricity. Okay, metal. Okay, copper. But if you look at an integrated chip, for example, the beauty lies in the fact that the semiconductor, if you are to consider the heart, okay, you need conductors also, because without conductors, how can you deliver, okay, power the circuit? You need conductors. Similarly, if you take an integrated chip, between these conducting wires, which is essentially, if I want to take ohmic contact, I use gold, noble metal. Why gold is preferred over any other metal? Why noble metal gold is preferred? Any idea?
Rare.
Anybody has a spark on that? Why gold is preferred over? Why can't we use copper for that matter, or aluminum? They are also metals.
Gold won't react with water or air moisture.
Very good. So if they react, what happens?
They form an oxide layer which reduces.
Essentially, very good. Good point. Who is that?
Dhanush.
Huh?
Dhanush.
Dhanush. Nice. So gold is preferred. But if you look at the wiring in the integrated chips, mostly copper is also okay because it is packed in a device. But ohmic contacts, if you are to make, we make, I will tell you what is ohmic and non-ohmic contacts later in this course. Okay. For now, you just get to me that the conductors, you can see the conductivity is enormous, 10 power 18 Siemens per meter. Okay. But semiconductors, you can tune the conductivity. That tuning is essentially the interesting thing, because, for example, if I am not able to tailor or tune the properties, I do not have the parameters to play around. But the playing is what gives rise to applications, as you will learn through this BTech program. The playing of the parameters that leads to tuning of this conductivity is what is going to be the essential requirement for driving semiconductor devices. Okay. Now, what are these elemental semiconductors? Germanium, silicon. But if you look at most of the applications, they use silicon over germanium. I will come to that later. Why silicon is preferred over germanium? For now, you understand that the parameters like thermal stability or inverse reverse breakdown voltage, okay, things of that nature. Silicon is having better performance over germanium. That is why it is preferred. Even though germanium's potential barrier, I will tell you what is a potential barrier. If you don't understand, it is okay for now. Just walk with me in this class. If you look at germanium's potential barrier is like 0.3 electron volt, whereas silicon is 0.7 electron volt. Okay, so approximately. So if you look at those kind of values, germanium has a lower potential barrier. That is fine. But so, however, the thermal stability and other parameters with silicon, they are far superior as compared to germanium, as you will learn through this entire BTech program. Okay, so That is essentially the reason why silicon is preferred. But compound semiconductors like gallium nitride is there, gallium arsenide is there, indium gallium arsenide is there. They have some special applications. We will look into that later in another slide. So, okay, how do I tune these electronic and optical properties? Because if you look at LED based on this light emitting diode, based on the semiconductor materials, you can actually, you are talking about tuning the LED gives rise to different colors. If you look at it, and why do they give those different colors? They essentially come from the fact that the band gap engineering. Okay, so those things are possible because you can, you see, you can tailor. Tailor means basically when I go to a tailor and give a cloth, okay, he can stitch in whatever model you want to prefer. Okay, so you got, like for example, if I want to stitch baggies, or if I want to, they call different models of the trousers or shirts. All these things a tailor can do based on the measurement. Here, the tuning of the properties of the semiconductor devices come from the basic semiconductors itself through what is called defect engineering, band gap engineering. Actually, it is band gap engineering. Defects, when you can modulate the defects, you can modulate the impurities. Okay, doping. Primarily, what is a process known as doping? Okay, so for example, if I take an intrinsic semiconductor, that is a semiconductor intrinsic. Intrinsic means coming from within, which means it could be related to the defects only. There is no impurity. It is completely 100% pure silicon. Whereas if I put impurity, then it becomes the property is controlled by the impurity rather than by the intrinsic property. That is the beauty in the semiconductor. So you talk about P-type or N-type, you can actually tune those properties depending on how much doping level that you obtain with the semiconductor. Is the point clear? So with the device doping, or with semiconductor doping, or with defect engineering, you can engineer the band gap, and also you can introduce what is called the energy levels within the band gap. That gives rise to the variability in the performance of the device when such a type of semiconductor materials are applied in it. Is the point clear? Is it clear? Is it clear, man?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us get back to one step backward. And what is material? If you look at, you have to understand, because all these properties come essentially from, in a semiconductor, what are the charge carriers? What are the charge carriers? Electrons and holes. And what constitutes a hole? And electron, we know that electrons revolve around the nucleus as Bohr put forward. Okay, and after Bohr, quantum mechanics took over on that aspect further, because Bohr's model was able to explain hydrogen atom perfectly well. But when you get into the higher atomic number elements, Bohr's theory, although fundamentally it is okay, it could not explain all the essential features. So there are other models which came into picture. Let us not digress too much on this topic. Let us stick to our semiconductor itself. But we need to understand about these electrons. But if I have to understand electrons, then I need to understand the crystal structure. Because if I look at the crystal structure, I can have an amorphous structure, I can have a single crystalline structure, I can have a polycrystalline structure. What are those essential? That is seen from the slide. You can see that how these atoms are packed in a solid, they constitute what is called order. But because every solid has Avogadro number, if I take 1 mole of solid, I can have like matter, I can have like 6.023 into 10 power 23 atoms in it, and they are packed, they are arranged in certain manner. But this arrangement actually constitutes the interaction between the atoms, and each atom has valence electrons and those valence electrons, combined action of these valence electrons through interaction between these atoms constitutes what is known as the combined average effect of the material itself when it is applied in a device. So therefore, if we have to get into the understanding of the semiconductor, we need to get into the atomic picture. So when I get into the atomic picture, then I need to essentially understand the packing. The packing comes from leads to what is known as an amorphous. Amorphous means where the atoms are not arranged in a proper manner. They are all. It is like in a party, the people are all around the place. Okay, so when they are all around the place, they give rise to what is known as the amorphous structure. But if you look at a polycrystalline material, I bring a certain order. So you go to a party and you give them, and they enjoy with all snacks and food. When they do that, they are all dancing around to the music. You look at anybody, you try to instill an order in them, it will never happen. But let us say, I consider a party with not youngsters, but rather with adults. The adults will have certain amount of order, and that is something like a polycrystalline material. In a polycrystalline material, the order is restricted to certain, localized areas, what is known as a domain, crystal domain. So in a polycrystalline material, as you see in this picture, you have a lot of atomic arrangements. You have like, what is called interplanars. You can see that it is separated by what is known as the grain boundary. So each grain constitutes some kind of an arrangement. We can see that arrangement in a polycrystalline. Whereas in crystalline material, the periodicity, the arrangement is perfect, which means order is completely there. Okay, but if you look at, so polycrystalline material, when the order is perfect, by free energy itself, we know that if the order is not there, okay, that is what the universe is about. Okay, free energy is highest, but when free energy is minimum, the order is perfect. That corresponds to a crystalline material. So a crystalline material, free energy is low, whereas a perfect amorphous material. So if I look at my hand, so if I draw the energy levels, my right hand is at the lower level, my left hand is at the higher level. You can see the left hand symbolizes the amorphous nature, whereas where the energy is higher. So that is exactly what is happening in a party. Is the point clear? So metaphor I used here, party, because to make you understand what is an amorphous, what is a polycrystalline. So because the atomic arrangement are different, they give rise to what is known as different, different packing, which means different packing leads to different interactions, and different interactions means the properties of these materials are going to be different, which is well known and well established fact. Is the point clear? Can you unmute and speak, somebody? Is the point clear so far?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you look at the silicon structure. Silicon is actually what is known as a diamond lattice. It crystallizes in diamond lattice. Most of the cases, the semiconductor industry, they use single crystalline silicon for the matter that they exactly know the behavior of the device perfectly well. If I have polycrystalline solar cell, they use polycrystalline material also. Most of the devices they want to start with single crystalline because they exactly know what material they are using. If I use some other material, I am going to be in trouble because I really do not know what, if I use amorphous, what is the level of, the period is, what is the level of disorder? I do not know. But amorphous semiconductors are also used, but they are not used everywhere. Especially in integrated chips, what we use. Okay, in solar cell probably they might be used in some applications, they are okay, but not everywhere. Okay, silicon, single crystalline silicon is preferred. because you know exactly what you are starting with, and then you do the dopant band gap engineering through controlled doping levels. Doping is addition of small impurity levels. Okay, when I add extremely small impurities, I am going to change the behavior of the device as an average behavior of the device as a whole, because every the entire solid which I am going to use is doped with a certain amount of what is the doping level? Typically, if you look at the doping level, we talk in terms of the number of atoms doped per unit volume. And a silicon device, when I talk about unit volume, even though SI unit is meter cube, we talk in semiconductor industry only in semiconductor centimeter cube. What is the reason? Can anybody guess why we talk the atomic density in terms of centimeter cube, not in meter cube? Anybody here in the class? Apply your mind and give me an answer. Somebody can talk. Mute your. If you do not know, let me tell you. You may not be aware of it. Let me give you an answer for that. The answer for that is basically because all of these devices are only centimeter dimensions. You take integrated chips. You are not having an integrated chips of a meter to calculate its volume in meter cube. Okay. So typical dopant level, it could be from 10 power 16 atoms to per centimeter cube to 10 power 19. Okay. We will talk about it later. Now, if you look at the silicon crystal structure, they crystallizes in diamond lattice. What is this diamond lattice? To understand the diamond lattice, I am sure that you know what is an FCC, face-centered cube. Okay, a face-centered cube structure. You take a cube, and there are 8 corners. In every face, you put at the center of the face, you put another atom. So typically, a face-centered cube, if you take a single cube and put, there are 6 faces in a cube, and there are like 14 atoms, 6 by 8 plus, if I take one cube with a face-centered 6 atoms, 8 corners plus 6 atoms. But not all of them belong to this unit cell. The unit cell, face-centered unit cell, not all of these atoms belong to it. Because if I take a unit cell is the smallest volume, which we talk. If I understand the behavior of the unit cell, then I can actually replicate the unit cell throughout the solid. And when it replicates, it is enough to understand the unit cell rather than understanding the entire solid. So if I take an unit cell, there are only 4 atoms per unit cell, because out of the corner atoms, only 1 atom is belonging to that. All the 8, each corner atom is shared by 8 other adjacent cubes, which means only its contribution to this unit cell is 1/8, but there are 8 atoms in this unit cell. Therefore, the number of corner atoms per unit cell is 8 into 1/8, which is 1 atom. Okay, so you can see here, this is the face-centered cubic. Okay, in the picture. Now, the diamond lattice is essentially 2 face-centered atom. Okay, so 2 face-centered interpenetrating face-centered unit cells. That is what diamond unit cell is. You don't have to understand in entirety. For now, you take it from me that it is interpenetrating face-centered lattice constitutes what is known as the diamond crystal structure. Okay, when 2 interpenetrating is there, the number of atoms in this per unit cell here is actually 4 plus 4, because there are 2 unit cells. Therefore, it becomes 8. It is very simple. So here in the unit cell, when I want to calculate the packing fraction of the solid, then it is actually 2 interpenetrating face-centered cubic unit cells. Therefore, it is like you have 4 plus 4 with the second unit face-centered by 1/4 of the along the body diagonal. Is the point clear? Is the point clear? So there are 8 atoms per unit cell in silicon. So what is the crystal structure of silicon? It crystallizes in what form? Please unmute and speak. Anantalakshmi, are you there? It crystallizes in what form? Silicon. Dhanush?
Sir, it like diamond structure.
Diamond lattice.
Diamond lattice. What is this diamond lattice? Two interpenetrating. It is two interpenetrating. FCC separated by 1/4 along the body diagonal. It is enough to understand that level. Okay. If silicon, it is pure silicon. And what is the bonding involved? You can look at this picture and can you please guess what will be the bonding?
Covalent bond.
Covalent bonding is perfect, but that bonding is okay. That is between two atoms. But if you look at here, each atom is connected to 4 other nearest neighbors. Each atom is connected to 4 other, right? Because each atom requires 4 valence electrons. So it can actually share with another 4 valence electrons, forming what is known as a tetrahedral bonding. What is this tetrahedron structure? Tetrahedron bonding. You know, this is like 109.5 degree. You can see in carbon. Carbon, silicon, they all belong to this thing. Diamond is a allotrope of carbon. What are the other allotropes of carbon?
Graphite.
Graphite.
Buckminster fluorine.
Buckminster fluorine.
And graphite, diamond like carbon, there is something called DLC, there is fullerene, C60 molecule, fullerene structure, with fullerene, CNT came carbon nanotube, and then there is also single wall carbon nanotube, double wall carbon nanotube, multi-wall carbon nanotube, and then graphene came. Okay, I am sure that you might have heard these names. Okay, for now, I think I will stop this lecture here. I will come back to you, which is beginning with that silicon has 4 valence electrons. What does that mean for us? I will start from there. Okay, and you understand that the bonding is tetrahedral bonding, and because of which silicon is actually, you can see that there are 8 what is called, if you look at silicon, it has like 4 valence electrons each atom, and because of which the number of electrons available for participating in the conduction per centimeter cube is enormous. Okay, we can do calculations, but I don't want to digress too much from this lecture of semiconductors. Let us try to understand what is an intrinsic semiconductor, extrinsic semiconductor, p-type and n-type, and what is an energy level. From there, when 2 atoms interact, what happens to that, and how is a band gap happening? Band gap happens. Band gap is nothing but the energy gap between the valence band and the conduction band. What is this band picture? And because of which we need to provide energy for any valence electron to be available in conduction band. Only if an electron hops to a conduction band, it is available for conduction. Is the point clear? I am sure that you must have heard all of these things at your high school. I am just refreshing your memory. All these points clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Whatever I taught in this class?
Yes, sir.